This lesson we're going to focus on introduction material for storytelling. I love this quote. The universe is made of stories, not of atoms. What do you think of that? Let's look at where are stories. Some of you may be thinking stories in a speech sounds a little basic. But let's think about where stories are and why they are so important. There are many different ways that we are surrounded by stories. Dreams, daydreams, sporting events. You have a good guy, a bad guy, you have conflict, and at the end you have a winner. Commercials, board games, the list goes on and on. So let's look a little bit at the history of storytelling. Storytelling is how our history was first passed down. Before mankind learned how to write or to draw, we learned how to speak. We would gather around the fire at the end of the day and we would listen to stories about our history. Early storytellers told the deeds of their heroes, and these stories were later expanded into tales and fables. Stories have been used since the time of our birth to teach us lessons. They help us to grow up and to learn how to integrate into society. In ancient cultures, storytellers were second to the king. Long before we could read, we were telling stories. And two, not everyone's been able to read. Early on in our history, only a few of the elites could read, and therefore they had to learn how to tell stories so that way those of us in the population that weren't given the opportunity to read could rely on the storytellers to tell us about the news of the day. So why is storytelling so important? I want you to read and pay close attention to the last part of this quote. Those in leadership positions who fail to grasp or use the power of stories risk failure for their companies and for themselves. How do you feel storytelling can relate in leadership? And is storytelling a skill that you can use in your leadership at your place of work? So why should we tell stories? As the listeners, we want to be able to relate to the speaker. And as a speaker, we want to engage our audience members. Stories do everything for us. Stories can inform our audience. They can persuade our audience. They entertain and they can inspire. Stories are us. They are our history, our lives. Everything that makes us form deeper connections with other human beings come from stories. Stories is how we interpret the world around us, and this is how we explain the world to others. Think about this. When you were a child, how did you learn lessons? You learned them through stories. As an adult, do you read stories and books to your children? Of course, because that's how we pass on the lessons. Same for speakers. Good speakers can tell stories. Great speakers can tell great stories. The stories we tell help us define ourselves and what matters to us. They help provide meaning and sense of direction. All of these skills can be used in your speeches. Stories help to create that bond between listener and speaker. The emotional connection, emotionally charges in the speech, and this causes the emotion to be contagious. If you want to be memorable as a speaker and well liked by your audience, you need to learn the skill of storytelling. And think about it. Stories are in all kinds of speeches. You'll see a lot of them in the debates. You'll see a lot of them from the presidential podiums. You'll see speeches holding stories at every level. This has been the introduction to storytelling. Next, we'll look at different skills for storytelling.